Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Darren. BFA is right around the corner. Let's start taking a look at some of the specs and classes as I've been kind of doing on the side. Today I want to talk a bit about Fury. Fury Warrior in BFA. This spec is important, especially Fury. I mean, we could talk about arms, we could talk about any spec, but with all the GCD changes, we saw Fury Warriors literally be at the bottom of the totem pole. Nobody wanted to play it. It was an upsetting spec to play because of the GCD changes. You couldn't stack a lot of cooldowns together and it just did not work. The spec didn't work. So then our thought process was, okay, Blizzard can do something about it. So they made a few changes, wasn't enough. Made a few more changes, wasn't enough. Made a few more changes. A lot of people were thinking of giving it up. And then Blizzard, out of nowhere, with whoever was in charge of Fury, came back with a spec and completely transformed it. And now it fits to the playstyle so well. It still plays within the GCD market that BFA is all about, but it basically ignores it. It was very CD heavy, so Blizzard were like, let's just take out a lot of these CDs and make the spec stand its own ground without always having to be reliant on cooldowns. Then they also added up a little bit more for its AoE, they added some nice visuals to the spec, and overall, I'm here to tell you guys what it's like to play on BFA. Fury had a 180 turnaround. It came into BFA, and again, the GCD stuff was really bad. When you have to stack, it was Battlecry, Avatar, Bloodbath, and trying to deal all that damage done together with Rampage, it was just not going to work. When you try to stack all the cooldowns, you have to spend one global putting one buff up, then the second buff, then the third buff, then you charge in, your charge having a bit of a GCD there to it too, a half a second GCD, and then you rampage, and a lot of your abilities are just gone. The extended duration of a lot of these cooldowns still felt clunky to have to like prep yourself 3 seconds before the fight, and then having to go in. They basically simplified it down to one big bursty cooldown. And while a lot of people are not happy with them simplifying it and just making it so instead of having a bunch of abilities you press basically at the same time, or when you combo them into a macro, the spec actually at least still works. It still plays around the whole GCD. They even changed it up a little bit to be more about, with the Recklessness, for example, not being all about 100% crit. It's like 20% crit, but it's more about building rage to spend that rage. So this is good for the spec. This means that all that ability does is let you get your abilities out, like Rampage, faster. It doesn't really buff the damage, it only buffs crit chance, but on its own means that the spec can stand its own ground, and all you're doing is speeding up your rotation to get more damage out. That means your baseline damage is strong and it's good, which I absolutely love. Also, what's great about the spec is the GCD that they are adding to BFA, not the GCD itself. Some people are still a little on the fence with the whole GCD, how just about every ability, buffs and whatnot, are on GCD. Not everybody's going to be happy about it. But if you're somebody who doesn't like the GCD, but you want to still maintain and play Fury without having to feel GCD quite as heavily, Fury tries to bypass and ignore it as much as possible. A lot like Demon Hunters, as well as some of the other classes, primarily the caster classes, that already have to cast a spell. You know, there's a cast time, and that basically takes a global cooldown already. Fury still feels very quick for the game. So it's really good. It feels really good to play. I don't know, a lot of people want to talk about the damage numbers, the mechanics, but it feels really good to play. As I'm going through my rotation, it doesn't feel like I'm having to buff, okay, clunky. It feels fairly smooth. With all the GCDs applied, it still maintains to feel fairly smooth. And I really like about the spec that we're able to nail it. So when you're playing the spec, like Shadow Priest, for example, when you play it, when you're playing the spec, it doesn't feel good. Yes, it deals good damage, but it just doesn't feel good to press the buttons you are given. With Fury, it's a whole nother story. You have good damage, and it feels to press the good buttons that you are given. Cleave also feels good, and I want to talk about it really quickly, because there's a lot. I love Cleave, but it's just going to be too much, because it doesn't sound exciting to be able to cleave targets, but for Fury, it feels so good. With Whirlwind allowing your next 2 single target abilities instead of 1 to cleave onto other targets, it opens up so many more avenues for you to be able to play the spec. When I say single target abilities, I even mean the ones found on your talent tree. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So if you have any abilities that are purely single target, your Whirlwind now becomes a Cleave AoE. I feel with Cleave being the way it is, that it allows 2 abilities instead of, say, 1 ability to cleave extra targets. It gives you a change to rotation. Whirlwind, choice. The player choice is very innumerable, and better players will find a better way to maximize their damage. For example, if there's a bunch of mobs and they're low health, or if, let's say, you need to extend your rage and try to build up that damage, better players will be able to use that Fury or use that rage in order to get those powerful rampages in there and they'll be able to sneak in those executes on targets about dead. As let's say if you focus down one target, execute it, you execute everybody in the group. You're getting a lot more rage out of it in general and a lot more effective damage. I feel like it's a lot of fun, and I actually been enjoying it. It's probably one of the best parts about Fury. Single target playstyle and everything is great, but the cleave, it feels so nice and clean, and there's a lot of variety to the playstyle. Finally, Rampage, oh, not Rampage, Recklessness. I keep confusing those two all the time, and I've been doing that all day. Recklessness feels really good. Recklessness is basically Battle Shout, but they're giving the name Recklessness back to the Warriors. Only Fury Warriors is the only one with Recklessness. Avatar is saved for Fury, or no, Prot, but also is a talent for Arms Warriors as well. Warrior Fury is the only one with Recklessness, and it's amazing. The way it looks is awesome. There's now these trailing animations behind all of your abilities as you're smacking down the enemy. It looks absolutely cool. Just the look of it looks insane. Like you're really raging at the enemy, like you're really trying to rampage them down, trying to cleave and cut them down as ASAP. It looks really good, and I cannot overstate that. And it's kind of great to see some of these visual animations, visual changes for like big burst cooldowns, because it's an absolute joy to be able to play Fury. And when you have this visual feedback on top of it for all your cooldowns, it makes it feel that much more exciting to get your big buttons off and do big damage. When it comes to PvP, I have a few things to say about the spec, because PvP and everything, stuff like that, is not finalized on the beta, but this is so far what I've been able to find. On PvP, Fury feels very glass cannon-y, and that's what we were able to find out on stream. I was hoping that you would have a lot more healing, and you have some healing that you can kind of talent yourself into as the spec, but you're definitely not as tanky as I expected it to be. I thought Fury was going to be very, very tanky, very, very healy, and was expecting for it to be kind of like a god for duels and self-sustain, but it really wasn't. But it's still really good regardless of that. I was just very much surprised that it wasn't that, I guess, tanky. For some reason, I came into duels outside of Warcraft thinking I'm just going to be a tank, I'm going to heal forever, I'll be able to maybe sacrifice some of my damage but have more of a heal-based build. Even the warriors, I mean, the warrior healing, besides Bloodthirst and maybe getting those victory rushes, there's not a lot you can really do besides that, can you? I also love that Fury Warriors executes really do deal a lot of damage. Like once you get the enemy target below a certain threshold, depending if you take talents or not, it actually blows people up. And I really, really like it. And in previous expansions, usually Arms have had the stronger execute. I mean, Fury gets to execute with both weapons, but Arms execute, like I'd say it's in PvP. Once the enemy target is below a certain threshold, it's basically, I mean, it's an execute. They're done. They're over. That's just going to be, don't got to get them all the way to 0. Just knock them out and then done. They're good to go. So the fact that the spec gets to do something like this, the fact that the spec actually can do good damage with this new talent, that it's not a new talent, it's a talent from previous expansions, but for BFA it's pretty new, and for Fury it's pretty fresh, where you get procs for executes that now also are free, just on a cooldown, but they grant your rage back. It plays up to the spec really, really well. The whole spec playing up to a whole rage generation, rage spending, executes being free, and the procs come in. I mean, for PvP, you can really turn it around. And I really like that about the spec. I feel like on the execute alone, most people, I guess, would bring an Arms Warrior if they want to, let's say, do a raid or a dungeon or PvP, just get someone low enough and then execute them out of nowhere. I feel that generally Arms Warriors have been better at that, but now Fury will be able to be just as competitive. So the only difference will be the Mortal Strike effect coming in from Arms Warriors, but that execute and the big burst damage and big good sustained damage from Fury, I think might be able to hold all on its own, which I find it kind of fun. Overall, the spec has been great. I'm super happy about it, and I even like the talents that you can play around with for PvP. Like, for example, playing around maybe with the execute proc, and you get on rage, and let's say you go Warbreaker on the enemy, where you, a general Warbreaker-like talent for Fury, where you'll slam down on the enemy, do more damage to them, Colossus style, or Colossus Smash style, play style. If you're able to combine that with the proc, and maybe with Recklessness for 20% crit, and it crits, the amount of damage you can put out to somebody is actually insane. Although Rogues are still going to give me trouble a little bit here and there. As a spec, I didn't feel like I had too much healing, which is what I was really, really expecting out of spec for whatever reason. Overall, it's still very fun and very, very good in general. I really like what they got going on for Fury. I like what Blizzard did with it, and it's good that Blizzard didn't kind of just abandon the spec. They kind of just kept the project going, and whoever was the person behind Fury Warrior buffs and changing up the playstyle and changing up what the spec is about, I think it turned out into a decent spec. Also, what I like about it is the fact that the rotation for the most part is more or less the same. You're going to see a lot of familiar abilities for PvP and PvE. But in the order that you use them, that's going to be one of the biggest things, is the order at which those abilities go. So Fury is going to be more or less more of the same that you love and enjoyed in Legion, but slightly different enough so it doesn't feel like the same, and I feel like that will add a little bit entertainment value for the spec, be it PvP, PvE, casual, or like heavy hardcore. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hopefully it gave you guys enough information about what Fury Warriors are like. I'm very happy with how the spec ended up being and how it turned out. I'm super happy, and I might even start playing Fury as, or at least Warrior as, one of the alts. I don't think it'll be it won't be one of the first 3 alts I'll level, because that's definitely going to be Rogue, then Hunter, then Warlock, or Warlock, then Hunter. I'm thinking do Hunter before Warlock though, just because it's so much fun. Survivors are great. But because of Fury, now I feel like it's worth playing Warrior and leveling Warrior just for Fury alone. I mean, don't get me wrong, Arms does good damage, Prot is looking pretty solid, decent-ish, but Fury is kind of where it's at. Fury is the fun spec, and that's the one that I've enjoyed for the longest time. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you guys enjoy videos like these and want to see more classes for me to cover, or more specs in particular, let me know in the comments below, and I would love to get to that. Maybe more of a detailed kind of look at all these specs. If you guys want to see more videos like these, hit the subscribe button. And if you're going to hit the subscribe button, you might as well hit the notification button as well, because subscribing sometimes just doesn't do it for YouTube anymore. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in another video.